The night the forest stopped breathing, I realized that silence can be louder than any scream. I've been a ranger for over a decade now, stationed in the northern stretches of Montana, where the peaks cut the horizon like jagged teeth, and the pine trees stand shoulder to shoulder like an army of green sentinels. Out here, the wilderness doesn't just surround you, it swallows you. You learn to move quietly, to listen, to respect the things that were here long before humans decided to name and patrol them. Most of the time, my job isn't glamorous. It's long hours of checking trails, marking boundaries, clearing fallen branches, and making sure campers don't turn the forest into a tinderbox. But over the years, I've seen things that still don't sit right in my mind. Strange shapes in the fog, the sound of footsteps that don't match my own, whispers in places where there shouldn't be voices. You try to rationalize it all. You tell yourself it's the wind, an animal, your own fatigue playing tricks on you. That's what we do out here. We explain things away until there's no explanation left. I remember one night, it must have been around late September. The air was colder than usual, sharp enough to sting your lungs. The fire ban had already gone into effect, so the camps were quiet. I was patrolling the East Ridge Trail, a stretch known to be rough on solo hikers. The path winds through an old-growth section where the trees block out almost all the light. Even at noon, it feels like dusk in there. That night, I got a call from dispatch. A hiker hadn't returned. He'd gone up near an area we call Raven's Hollow, an isolated ravine about 12 miles out. Locals say the place is cursed, that the ground there remembers things. I used to laugh at that. Used to. I took my pack, my light, my radio, and started up the ridge. The trail narrowed, swallowed by thick moss and roots that twisted like veins. Every sound carried too far. The snap of a twig, the rustle of my own coat, even the beating of my heart. It all echoed back at me, like the forest was repeating it. Halfway up, I found the man's camp, his tent flattened, his pack torn open, gear scattered like someone had panicked and ran. But there was no sign of blood, no drag marks, just absence. The kind that feels heavy, like the air itself is waiting for something to move. I called it in, marked the GPS coordinates, and went deeper into the hollow. That's when I started hearing it, the knocking. 3 steady hits, paused, then again. It sounded like someone tapping on a tree with a stick, too rhythmic to be random, too deliberate to be nature. I froze, tried to pinpoint the direction, but it bounced through the trees. Then came another sound, lower, heavier, like something exhaling just behind me. I swung my light around, but the beam hit nothing except falling snow and fog. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound calm. "If you can hear me, call back." No answer, just that same 3-part knock, now closer. I should have turned back. I knew that even then. But something in me, the part that believed in duty, in not leaving a man behind, kept me walking toward the sound. The ground dipped sharply, and I found myself at the lip of a ravine. My flashlight caught a faint reflection below, a glimmer of something metallic. I climbed down, careful on the slick roots, and there it was, the hiker's flashlight still on, lying in the mud. The beam flickered across the rocks and hit something pale. For a split second, I thought it was his face. But when I stepped closer, I realized it was bark, smooth, bone-white, carved into what looked like a human handprint. I backed away slowly. Every instinct in me screamed that I shouldn't be there. And then, as if to confirm it, I heard it again. Closer now, above me. 3 knocks, and then another 3, answering from the other side of the ravine. 2 sources, communicating. The forest went still after that. No wind, no birds, no insects, just the echo of my own pulse pounding in my ears. I climbed out of that ravine like a man possessed, tripping over roots, tearing my gloves on the rocks. When I finally reached the ridge, my radio crackled to life with static so sharp it made me flinch. For a second, through the distortion, I thought I heard a voice. A single word. My name. That was enough. I turned back toward base, moving fast. But the knocks followed me, always behind, always 3 beats, always close enough to feel rather than hear. By the time I made it to the trailhead, the sounds stopped. The world felt normal again. The search continued for 3 days. We never found the hiker. His prints led up to the ravine, then vanished like he'd stepped into the air. The official report said he probably fell, maybe swept into a stream, body carried off downstream. I signed the paperwork like I was supposed to, but I know what I heard. And sometimes when I'm deep in the woods alone, I still hear it. The 3 knocks. Always distant, always patient, like it's waiting for me to answer back. After that night, I started sleeping with the radio on. Sometimes, through the static, I hear faint clicking noises. They come in 3s. I told myself it was interference. I had to believe that, because the alternative meant something was out there that could mimic, follow, and remember. Over the next few weeks, other rangers started reporting strange sounds too. Heavy prints around their cabins, branches arranged in patterns, and that same steady knocking. None of us talked about it openly, but we felt it. The woods were changing. And I started to realize something I wish I hadn't. The deeper you work in a place like this, the more it begins to know you. The woods were changing. Not in any way you could measure or map or log in a ranger's report, but in ways you felt. The wind didn't sound right anymore. It moved through the trees in these strange broken rhythms, like breath held too long and released too fast. Birds that had always been early risers went silent for entire mornings. Even the deer, the constant, nervous heartbeat of this forest, seemed to vanish from the trails. When the other rangers noticed it too, we all reacted the same way, pretending it was nothing. You don't admit fear in this line of work. You joke, you drink your bad coffee, you brush the mud off your boots and say, "Guess it's mating season for the weirdos again." But inside, every one of us was listening a little harder when the wind shifted. I started noticing smaller things first, things I could still explain away if I wanted to. My cabin door would be cracked open in the morning, though I was sure I'd locked it the night before. My boots, left drying by the fire, were sometimes sitting in a different spot by dawn. Once my flashlight was on when I woke up, just sitting on the table humming softly. At first, I thought maybe I was just tired. The search for that missing hiker had run us all thin. But then I found something that tore that comfort apart. It was a morning patrol. Frost had painted the meadow white, and the fog hung low enough that it seemed to swallow my knees as I walked. I came across a clearing that I didn't recognize, not marked on any map, not on any trail. That alone was strange. I knew every ridge, every path, every forgotten service road in these woods. But this place, it was like the forest had rearranged itself overnight. In the center of the clearing stood a single tree, dead, pale, stripped of bark. Around its base were handprints pressed deep into the soil, dozens of them, small ones, large ones, some long-fingered, too long. I crouched down to look closer. The prints were fresh. The soil was still wet, as if something had just been there. And then I noticed the same pattern in them, 3 sets grouped together, evenly spaced, circling the tree. 3. Always 3. I don't remember walking back. I just remember the sound of the radio hissing on my shoulder, and the feeling that if I turned around, I'd see something watching from between the trees. That night, I called in to dispatch and told them I wasn't feeling well. I lied. I just couldn't bring myself to step outside after dark. The forest, once a place that felt like home, had turned on me. Every shadow outside the cabin seemed alive, pressing close to the windows. Then came the smell. It started faint, like wet fur and metal. I thought an animal had died nearby, but by midnight it was stronger, thick, like copper and rot mixed with something sweet, like pine sap burning. I checked the perimeter with my flashlight, and that's when I saw the prints again. Deep, wide, pressed into the mud right outside my door. Whatever made them was heavy and barefoot. I followed them for maybe 20 yards before they stopped. Suddenly, cleanly, as if whoever made them had simply lifted into the air. That was the first time I truly felt something like panic in these woods, a kind that stripped away all the years of training and pride. When I turned to head back, I caught movement, something tall moving behind the tree line. My light hit a shape for only a second, but that was enough. Broad shoulders, long arms, a head that seemed too high, too upright. The beam caught its eyes. They glowed, not like reflection, but like they burned from within. Then it moved, fast, impossibly fast, vanishing into the dark like smoke. I don't remember running back to the cabin, but I remember slamming the door so hard it cracked the frame. I sat there for hours, radio clutched to my chest, waiting for daylight. When morning finally came, I found something nailed to my door. A piece of wood. 3 knocks carved into it. I didn't report it. I didn't tell anyone. Because deep down, I already knew what the reaction would be. Another ranger gone off the deep end, another guy losing it in the woods. I'd seen it before. Rangers who spent too long out here start hearing things, seeing things. The isolation gets to them. But this wasn't in my head. I started noticing other things, subtle, but there. Equipment disappearing from the sheds, patrol cameras going offline for no reason. And the forest, it started to smell wrong, even in the daylight. We had a meeting that week. 3 of us around a coffee-stained table, me, my supervisor, and another ranger from the West Post. They both looked worn out, hollow-eyed. The West Post ranger said something that made my stomach twist. "You heard it too, didn't you?" He didn't have to explain what it was. He told us he'd been hearing the same knocks, the same pattern. And 2 nights before, he'd found a clearing full of bones, animal, mostly, but arranged in circles like offerings. That's when my supervisor, a man I'd always seen as steady as granite, leaned back and said something that silenced the room. "It's not new," he said. "These stories go back decades. They just don't make it into the reports." He told us about an old ranger named Foster who'd vanished back in the 70s. Last radio transmission was garbled, but the transcript still existed. The only clear word they could make out before the line went dead was knocking. After that, there was nothing more to say. We all just sat there, listening to the wind press against the cabin walls. That night I made a decision. I needed proof, something tangible, something I could bring back that wasn't just fear and words. So I went back to Ravens Hollow. I told myself it was to find evidence, to make sense of what we'd seen. But maybe, if I'm honest, I just needed to face it, to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. The path looked different this time, narrower, darker. I followed the ravine down until the trees parted, revealing a mouth in the hillside, a cave I'd never seen before. Its entrance was blacker than night, and the air pouring from it was cold, stale, metallic, like something ancient breathing out. My flashlight caught carvings near the entrance, 3 vertical lines repeated over and over. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. My footsteps didn't echo. The beam of my light seemed to fade, eaten by the dark. And then I smelled it again, that same copper-sweet scent. There was something ahead, something moving. And in that moment, I finally understood what everyone meant when they said, "The forest remembers." It wasn't just nature keeping score, it was something else, something old, awake, and waiting. The air inside the cave clung to me like damp cloth. Every breath felt thick, metallic, like I was inhaling rust. The light from my flashlight bounced off slick stone and caught the glimmer of frost crystals clinging to the walls, forming shapes that almost looked like fingerprints. The deeper I went, the less the cave felt like a natural formation. The walls narrowed unevenly, curved in ways that suggested purpose, tunnels shaped not by water or erosion, but by hands. There were markings everywhere. Carvings etched deep into the rock, some so old they looked like shadows burned into the stone. The same 3 lines repeated over and over, sometimes crossed with an arc, sometimes spiraling into each other. My light trembled as I moved it, and I realized my hand was shaking. Not from cold, from something older. Primal. The kind of fear that doesn't just warn you of danger, it tells you you've already gone too far. The smell grew stronger the deeper I went. Sweet, metallic, and rancid all at once. It filled the back of my throat and made my eyes water. I thought about turning back more than once, but each time I felt this pull, like gravity or guilt, dragging me forward. Then I heard it, the same pattern, 3 knocks. They came from deeper within the cave, muffled but distinct. Then, seconds later, the same 3 came again, behind me. I froze. The air went cold, sharp, My flashlight flickered, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw movement ahead, a shape slipping between the rock like smoke. I whispered into my radio, trying to steady my voice. This is Ranger Unit 4. I'm inside a cave off Raven's Hollow. I need static, nothing else. Then something answered the static, a voice low and broken, threaded through the interference. Don't follow. My blood went cold. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but the tone, it sounded like pleading, desperate. And then through the static, another noise. Not a voice this time. Breathing. Deep. Wet. Uneven. So close that I instinctively turned my light behind me. Nothing. Just the rock, slick and sweating with moisture, but I could feel it. The presence, like standing on a stage while someone hides behind the curtain, eyes on you. I kept moving. Slowly. Every step pressed into mud that sucked at my boots, pulling like it wanted to keep me. My light caught a faint shape ahead, a piece of fabric hanging from the rock. A red jacket, torn down the middle. I knew that jacket. It was from the missing hiker. The fabric was stiff, frozen with something dark. And carved into the rock beside it, shallow but deliberate, were words, scratched in jagged letters. It watches where the trees end. I didn't understand what that meant. Not then. I just knew I needed to get out. I turned to retrace my steps, but the tunnel wasn't the same. The turns were sharper, narrower. I knew the way I came in, but now every path looked wrong. The light trembled across walls that seemed to pulse in and out of focus. The air grew thicker, heavier. My chest ached. Every sound felt too close, too real. The drip of water, the scuttle of unseen insects, my own heartbeat pounding in my skull. And underneath it all, that steady rhythm. 3 knocks. Except this time they didn't stop. 3 on one side, 3 on the other, then 3 directly in front of me, echoing from deeper in the black. Like the sound was closing in. Something moved. I don't know what I saw first, the outline of its shoulders, or the way its head brushed the low ceiling as it crouched forward. My light barely touched it, but I saw enough to know it wasn't a bear. Not even close. Its skin, or what passed for it, looked wrong. Matte, dark, like bark soaked in mud. The face wasn't right either. It was stretched, uneven, with a jaw that hung too far down, teeth like chipped stone, and its eyes, they didn't reflect the light. They absorbed it. It didn't move fast, not at first. It just stood there, watching me breathe. The only sound was its slow inhale, that wet, dragging rasp. I backed up, one step at a time, keeping the light steady. My hand brushed against the radio, but before I could press it, the thing straightened to its full height, and I swear it must have been at least 8 feet tall. The top of its head scraped the ceiling, and then it did something that froze my blood solid. It raised one arm, long skeletal fingers, and knocked 3 times. Slowly, deliberately. It was it. The sound. The knocking. That was when I ran. The tunnel walls blurred as I stumbled through, half crawling, half sprinting. My light crashed against stone, flickering in and out. I didn't care where I was going anymore, just away. I could hear it behind me, the scrape of claws against rock, the dull thud of heavy steps. It wasn't running, but it didn't need to. It was keeping pace. The passage narrowed again, forcing me to drop to my knees. My radio clattered somewhere behind me, lost to the dark. The smell burned my throat, my lungs, my eyes. The air felt alive, vibrating with sound. The knocks overlapping, echoing from every direction now, faster, louder, until I couldn't tell if it was stone breaking or bones. And then, just when I thought the cave would crush me, I saw light, a thin slit of gray-blue ahead. I crawled toward it, fingers bleeding, lungs tearing. The knocks followed, relentless. Closer, closer. Then, right as I reached the mouth of the cave, the sound stopped. Completely. The silence hit me like impact. I stumbled out into the open air, gasping, collapsing into the frost. The forest around me was gray with dawn. Birds chirped somewhere distant, soft and thin, like the world was pretending everything was normal again. When I finally looked back, the cave entrance was gone. I mean it. It wasn't there anymore. Just rock, moss, and snow. No hollow, no mouth. Nothing. I stayed there until the sun broke the ridge, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I made it back to the station sometime mid-morning, clothes torn, face streaked with dirt and blood. I didn't tell anyone the truth. I couldn't. What was I supposed to say? That something was living under the mountain, knocking to lure us in? So I wrote the report. Possible fall. No visual confirmation. Area unstable. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those black eyes. Heard that slow, patient rhythm. 3 knocks. I thought it was over. That maybe whatever was down there stayed where it belonged. But I was wrong. 2 nights later, someone knocked on my cabin door. 3 times. 3 knocks. The sound froze me mid-breath. I remember the way the coffee cup trembled in my hand, the faint ripple of liquid catching the firelight. It was just past 2 in the morning. Windless. The kind of stillness that makes every small sound feel magnified, deliberate. The knocks came again, slow, heavy. Not rushed, not panicked. Each one spaced perfectly apart, like whoever or whatever was on the other side of that door wasn't in any hurry at all. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stared at the door, watching the handle vibrate slightly with the impact. My mind scrambled for logic. Could be a lost hiker, could be a fellow ranger, but every instinct I had screamed that wasn't true. I'd heard those knocks before. Not with my ears, but somewhere deeper. Somewhere, memory doesn't let you forget. I reached for my flashlight, the same one I'd taken into the cave. The casing was still cracked from when I dropped it running out, the lens scuffed. When I turned it on, the light came out in uneven waves, flickering like a dying pulse. The radio hissed softly beside me, just static. I thought about calling in, but stopped myself. What would I even say? The knocking stopped. I waited, heart pounding, every sense stretched to breaking. Then came the sound of something moving along the wall outside. Slow, dragging footsteps circling the cabin. The boards creaked under the weight, the faint crunch of snow shifting. When the footsteps reached the window, I turned the light toward it. The glass reflected my own face back at first. Then, behind my reflection, something else. A shadow, too tall. Shoulders hunched, head tilted sideways like it was studying me. The glass fogged over from the heat of my breath, and for a second, I swore I saw the faint outline of a hand press against the other side. 5 long fingers. I stumbled back, knocking over the chair. My pulse hammered in my throat, loud enough that it felt like the only sound in the world. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the shape moved away. The footsteps faded into the woods. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just sat there, flashlight in one hand, sidearm in the other, waiting for dawn. Every creak of the cabin felt like it might be the beginning of those knocks again. When morning finally came, I stepped outside, boots crunching in the frost. The prints were there, huge, wide, barefoot. They circled the cabin once, then vanished into the tree line. I followed them until they disappeared entirely into the soft snow. The trees stood quiet, motionless, like they were watching. That day, I packed, told my supervisor I needed a few weeks off. He didn't argue. He looked at me the way people look at a man who's seen something he can't quite explain. Maybe he'd seen it too, once. I drove south, away from the mountains, trying to leave the forest behind. But the thing about places like that is, they don't really let you go. Even when I was 200 miles away, sleeping in a cheap roadside motel, I could still hear the sounds, sometimes faintly, when the air conditioner kicked on, or when a car passed outside. 3 faint taps on the wall, barely audible, but always there. A few days later, I started having dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but memories warped through sleep. The cave, the red jacket, those black eyes. But what terrified me wasn't seeing the thing, it was hearing it. The knocks, slow and measured, echoing through the dream like a metronome marking the end of time. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced that if I turned on the light, I'd see it standing there at the foot of the bed. After a week of that, I couldn't take it anymore. I went back. It sounds insane, I know, but when something follows you that far, you start to realize you're not running from a place, you're running from yourself. The only way out is through. The drive back felt longer than it should have. The mountains rose ahead of me like a wall. The forest looked different now. Blacker, denser, almost as if the shadows had grown thicker in my absence. When I reached the ranger station, it was quiet. No vehicles. No voices. The wind had picked up, hissing through the trees like a warning. The cabin door was still scarred where something had struck it. The wood around the frame splintered. I stepped inside, half expecting to find the smell, the handprints, something, but it was just empty. For a while, I stood there, listening. The silence felt heavier than before. Almost. Aware. Then I heard it again. Not outside this time, inside. 3 knocks. From beneath the floor. I froze, every muscle locking tight. The sound came again, louder this time, the boards under my feet vibrating with the impact. I stumbled back, hitting the wall. The knocks came once more, then silence. I grabbed my flashlight and knelt down. The floorboards near the old wood stove were slightly raised, warped from moisture. I pried one loose with my knife. The smell that rushed out hit me like a punch, rot and metal and something else, something wrong. I aimed my light into the gap. There was a void beneath the cabin, an old crawl space I'd never noticed before. The light caught something down there, a shape, human-sized. Still. For a second, I thought it was a body, but then it moved. Slowly, turning its head toward the light. I fell backwards, scrambling, the flashlight clattering across the floor. I heard it drag itself forward, fingernails scraping the underside of the boards. The sound was so human, but it wasn't. Then, from the shadows below came a voice. Low, guttural, broken, like it was learning how to speak. It said my name. I ran. Out the door, across the clearing into the tree line. I didn't stop until I hit the service road. I called dispatch from my truck, barely able to form words. They sent a team up. When they lifted the boards, the space was empty. Nothing but dirt and roots. No smell, no body, no prints. But I saw it. I heard it. After that night, I left the service for good. I told them I needed time to recover. I told myself I'd never go back. It's been 5 years now. I live 3 states away, in a place where the trees are smaller, the nights shorter. I work odd jobs, keep to myself. But sometimes late at night, I hear it again. Not loud, not close, just a faint rhythm under the surface of everything. When the pipes settle, when the rain hits the roof, when the wind shifts just right, 3 knocks. And when it comes, I sit perfectly still. I don't answer, because I think that's what it wants, for someone to answer back. And I think that's how it finds you again. I've tried to live quietly since then, far from the mountains, far from the pines that used to sing when the wind rolled through them. Out here, the air is dry, the ground flat, and the horizon feels wider. But it's strange what follows you. The smell of pines still clings to my jacket somehow. The cold bite of mountain morning still finds its way into my dreams. And those dreams, they've changed. They used to be about running, about being chased through the dark, that steady rhythm always behind me. Now they're quieter. I see the forest from above, stretching endless, no boundaries, no trails. I see my old cabin like a pin of light in the distance, and beneath it, the ground moves, breathes. Like something vast is sleeping just under the skin of the earth. The knocks come softer now, like echoes through memory. Sometimes I wake up convinced it was just the old heater or the building settling, but sometimes it's clear, distinct. 3 slow beats, patient, like it knows I'm listening. It's taken me years to stop asking what it was. I've read the old reports, talked to retired rangers, and every one of them has a story that bends the same way. A light where there shouldn't be one. Footprints that start and end in snow. Whispers carried by the trees. We write them off as fatigue or altitude or imagination. But all of them end with the same silence, the same unspoken agreement. Some things in the woods are better left unnamed. Still, I keep coming back to one question, the one that's haunted me most. Why me? Why knock on my door? Why say my name? I think now I've started to understand. When you spend enough time out there, you start to feel the line blur between observer and observed. You think you're patrolling the forest, protecting it. But maybe the forest is studying you, measuring the way you move, the way you breathe, the way you fear. Maybe those knocks were never a threat. Maybe they were a question, an invitation. The older rangers used to say the forest has moods, that it tests the people who walk it. You respect it, you listen, You live, you take too much, you ignore the signs, it reminds you who's in charge. That's what I think the knocking was. A reminder, not that the forest is haunted, but that it's alive. That somewhere deep inside there's a pulse that's been beating since before any of us showed up with maps and radios and rules. But there's another thought, one that keeps me awake. What if the forest isn't trying to protect itself? What if it's trying to replace us? Every year, more rangers go missing. It never makes the news, just quiet resignations, names disappearing from the roster. The records always say the same thing, voluntary transfer, lost contact, unknown cause. Sometimes I wonder if the forest takes us piece by piece, first our sleep, then our sense of direction, then our voice, until one day it learns how to knock like we do, how to call like we call, how to be us. I still have my old ranger badge. I keep it in a box with the broken flashlight and the red scrap of fabric they found later, buried deep in a rock slide near Raven's Hollow. They never identified it, but I know what it is. I touch that badge sometimes, feel the cold metal under my fingers, and I think about how proud I used to be wearing it. How sure I was that I understood the wilderness. Now I know better. The trail doesn't end at the last mile marker. It ends where the map runs out, where the air turns still and the shadows move like water. It ends at the moment you stop pretending you're in control. That's where the darkness begins. I've gone back a few times, not into the mountains, but close enough to see them. I park by the old service road, watch the fog crawl over the tree line, and listen. I tell myself I'm there for closure, but the truth is, I think I miss it. The way the forest made me feel small, fragile, temporary. Once, standing there at dusk, I heard it again. 3 knocks, faint and far away. They came from somewhere deep in the valley, carried on the wind like a memory. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt seen. Maybe that's what it always wanted, to be remembered. I turned to leave, and in the fading light, I saw something at the edge of the trees. A figure, tall, still. I couldn't make out the face, but it stood the way I used to stand, radio on the shoulder, flashlight in hand, scanning the tree line. For a second, I thought it was a mirror. Then the figure raised its hand, not to wave, to knock. 3 slow beats echoing through the dusk. I didn't move, didn't run. I just stood there, watching as the forest swallowed it whole. When I got back to my truck, I realized something that made my hands shake. The knocks hadn't echoed. They'd come from inside the trees themselves. The sound hadn't traveled through air. It had come from within, like the forest was speaking through its own bones. I started the engine and drove away, but I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need to. Because once you've heard the forest speak, you start to understand it never really stops. It's in the hum of the tires, in the creak of old wood, in the beating of your own heart. 3 slow rhythms, perfectly spaced, reminding you that no one truly leaves the wilderness. You just stop answering its call. And maybe one day when I'm gone, someone else will take my place out there. Another ranger, walking the same ridge at dusk, thinking they're alone, and maybe they'll hear it too. The quiet, patient knocking that's been echoing through the trees for centuries, waiting for someone to listen long enough to understand what it means. When that happens, I hope they don't run. I hope they stop and listen, because maybe it isn't the sound of something coming for us. Maybe it's the sound of something trying to remind us that we were never really separate from it at all, that the forest doesn't end where the trail does, that where the trail ends, the darkness begins. They told me there were valleys you just didn't go into. No signs, no fences, just the kind of silence that pressed on your chest until you understood you weren't supposed to be there. I used to think that was superstition. Every ranger station has its ghost stories, its warnings traded over campfires like some initiation rite. But the valley I'm about to tell you about, it wasn't just another story. It was the kind of place that changes the sound of your own breathing, the kind that makes you wonder whether you've ever really been alone in the woods. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I've worked as a forest ranger for 15 years, most of them in the northern ranges of Montana, land so raw it feels older than time. Out here, the sky's wide enough to make you forget what walls feel like, and the trees grow so close together you start to think they're whispering behind your back. I'd come to love that silence, that unbroken stillness that makes lesser men uneasy. But in those quiet hours before dawn, even I sometimes caught myself listening for something that wasn't supposed to be there. When I first transferred to the Bitterroot district, the older rangers had a phrase, "Don't cross the draw." They'd say it casually, half a joke, as if the draw was some kind of local hazard like black bears or flash floods. But every time I asked where it was, they'd go quiet. One old ranger, Hal, who'd been in the service since the 70s, told me only this: "You'll know it when you feel it. The air goes still, and even the wind won't speak your name." It didn't make sense at the time. But the first time I found the place, I understood. It was late September, fire season tapering off, tourists gone home, and the woods slipping back into their natural rhythm. I was patrolling a remote stretch near Knife Ridge, following up on reports of missing cattle from a nearby ranch. The terrain back there is tricky: narrow ravines, sudden drop-offs, and a dense tangle of cedar and spruce that eats radio signals alive. I was on foot, my truck parked 3 miles north, following an old game trail down into a low basin. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. No birds, no bugs, not even the wind. It was like walking into a vacuum. My boots crunched through old needles and soft mud, and even that sound felt wrong, too sharp, too alone. Then, without realizing, I'd stepped over a ridge and into what could only be described as a hidden valley. It wasn't large, maybe a mile wide, rimmed by cliffs that sloped inward like the walls of a giant bowl. The trees grew twisted here, their trunks bent as though the earth itself had once tried to swallow them. I remember the smell first. Not rot, exactly, something like wet stone, old and mineral, the smell of a place that hadn't seen sunlight in a long time. The air felt heavier, colder. And there, in the center, I saw the cave. It wasn't marked on any map, just a black gash in the hillside, wide enough for a man to walk through upright. The ground around it was disturbed. Patches of moss ripped up, small stones scattered. I told myself it was probably an animal den, maybe a bear, but the prints on the ground didn't match anything I knew. They weren't pawed. They weren't booted. They looked almost like hands. I should have turned back right then. But curiosity is a ranger's curse. You're trained to investigate, to check, document, understand. So I clicked on my flashlight and stepped closer. Inside, the cave swallowed the light. The beam caught streaks of moisture along the walls, each droplet trembling like it was alive. A few steps in, the smell intensified, iron and damp earth. The ground dipped sharply downward, forcing me to crouch. Then I heard something, a faint tapping sound, rhythmic, deliberate. It echoed through the dark like someone knocking on hollow stone. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. I froze. At first I thought it might be water dripping, but the pattern was too perfect, too human. I called out a low, steady hello, but my voice didn't carry right. It came back to me distorted, delayed by a fraction of a second, like the cave was repeating me in its own language. That was enough. I backed out slowly, trying not to make noise, flashlight trembling in my grip. When I stepped back into daylight, I felt something strange, warmth. The sun was hitting my face again, but it felt like stepping out of a fever dream. I turned to mark the location on my GPS, and the screen glitched. The coordinates spun, flickering nonsense. Then the device powered off completely. By the time I got back to my truck, the radio was dead too. I told myself it was just interference from the cliffs, maybe magnetic rock deposits. But deep down, I knew something was off. I didn't file a report. I didn't tell the others. I just made a note in my field log. Unmarked depression south of Knife Ridge. A void area. For weeks, I tried to forget about it. But it didn't forget about me. It started with dreams, standing at the cave entrance, hearing that same tapping sound, only this time it was coming from behind me. Then the smell of wet stone began showing up in places it shouldn't, inside my cabin, on my clothes, in the steam rising from my morning coffee. I'd wake up to the sound of dripping water, though my sink was bone dry. Hal noticed first. "You been down there, haven't you?" He asked one morning over coffee. His tone wasn't accusatory, just tired, like a man who already knew the answer. "I don't know what you mean." "Yeah, you do." He stared out the window, jaw tight. "That place changes you, takes something out of you. We lost a man there once. 84, I think. Didn't die. Just came back wrong. Quit a month later, moved east. Said he could still hear it calling. I wanted to ask what it was, but I didn't. I could see the fear in Hal's eyes, and that scared me more than anything. Rangers don't scare easy. A week later, I went back. I don't even know why. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe the valley just wanted me back. The night before, I'd woken up to a sound outside my cabin. 3 soft knocks on the wall, evenly spaced. When I stepped outside, flashlight ready, there was nothing but trees. The forest looked darker than usual, like it was holding its breath. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I packed light, just my sidearm, a GPS, and extra batteries. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I followed the same route as before, moving fast, but when I reached the ridge, something was different. The air wasn't just still, it was vibrating. Like the sound before a thunderclap when the whole forest seems to wait. The cave was waiting for me too. I crouched at the entrance, light cutting into the dark. And there, on the wall just inside, were scratches, lines gouged into the stone. Not random, not animal. Words, or something like them. Symbols I didn't recognize, drawn in sets of 3. That's when I realized the tapping I'd heard before wasn't random. It was a pattern, a language, and it was trying to talk back. The cave had gone completely silent now. No more tapping, no dripping, no wind, just that thick, motionless dark that feels like it's pressing on your eardrums. My flashlight flickered once, dimmed, then steadied again, casting a weak, trembling circle on the wall. I stepped closer to the markings, tracing them with the beam. They weren't carved with tools, more like clawed into the rock by something with long fingers and patience. Each symbol repeated in 3s, scratched deep, then shallow, then deep again. It felt intentional, almost ritualistic. I tried to take a photo, but my phone screen only showed static, the image distorting as if something behind the wall was pulsing against it. I should have turned around. I knew that, but fear has a strange way of numbing reason. You think you're being brave, but really you're just too terrified to stop moving. I went deeper. The passage narrowed into a crawl space that forced me down onto my hands and knees. My flashlight beam danced across uneven rock, catching glimpses of things I didn't want to recognize, smooth shapes that might have been bones, half buried in silt. The air smelled old, like stone that had been wet for centuries. My breath came out in visible puffs, even though it wasn't cold outside. Then, faintly, I heard it again. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. Only this time, they were closer and coming from below me. I froze, heart hammering, palms pressed into the cold ground. The tapping moved, slow and deliberate, like someone crawling beneath the earth, following my path. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Who's there?" The sound stopped. Then, impossibly, 3 taps echoed back, this time from the wall beside me. I pulled back fast, my shoulder scraping stone. Something about the timing of that response, it wasn't random. It was mimicking me, testing me. I don't remember deciding to crawl faster, but I did. The tunnel sloped down, air thinning with each breath. When I finally reached an opening, I stood up too quickly, dizzy and disoriented. My flashlight beam cut through a wide chamber, the walls glistening with mineral sheen. And there, at the center, was a pool of water so black it looked bottomless. I could hear it breathing. Not the wind. Not my own ragged breath. A steady, rhythmic sound rising from that pool. Soft exhale, then faint inhale, as if the water itself was alive. My hands were shaking, but I leaned closer, mesmerized. The reflection that stared back wasn't mine. It looked like me, same face, same uniform, but its eyes were wrong, too wide, too bright. They shimmered, catching the flashlight like animal eyes in the dark. The reflection smiled. I didn't. Then it whispered, no louder than breath across glass, "Stay." I stumbled backward, flashlight clattering against the stone. The reflection didn't move, it just kept smiling, the sound of breathing echoing from the water. I turned and ran. Crawled, scraped, climbed, anything to get out. My pack snagged on rock. I left it behind. Every time I stopped to catch breath, I heard that faint rhythm again. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. Closer now. When daylight finally hit my face, I dropped to my knees, gasping. The sun looked too bright, too foreign, like I'd been underground for hours instead of minutes. My watch was stopped at 2:13 p.m., though I'd entered the cave around 10 in the morning. The forest outside looked unchanged, but something felt wrong. The air was thick, the silence heavy again. I tried my radio, nothing. My GPS blinked once, then froze. The coordinates read .0000, 0.000. By the time I made it back to the truck, I couldn't shake the smell of wet stone. It clung to me like smoke. I drove straight to the station, filed the bare minimum report, checked uncharted depression, geological hazard, no further access recommended, and said nothing else. That night, I dreamed of the reflection. It stood outside my cabin window, smiling that same thin smile, tapping on the glass in perfect rhythm. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. I woke up drenched in sweat, every nerve screaming. The clock read 2:13 a.m., the exact time my watch had stopped in the cave. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the room. Empty. No sign of intrusion. But the window pane was damp, like someone had pressed their face against it. The following morning, Hal was waiting for me outside the station. He didn't say good morning, didn't even look at me, just said, "You went back, didn't you?" I nodded. He sighed, rubbing his jaw. "You shouldn't have done that. Once you hear it, it doesn't stop. It remembers you." "What do you mean? There's something old in that valley, older than the trees, older than us. We used to think it was just a story, until men started coming back. Wrong. Some of them quit. Some didn't. One of them wandered into town last winter, skin pale, eyes dark, wouldn't speak, just stood outside the diner and tapped on the glass. 3 times, then 3 more. Sheriff found him the next morning, drowned in an inch of water." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "You think I'm going to end up like that?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me, really looked, and I saw pity in his eyes. "If you start hearing it outside the woods," he said quietly, "you run. Don't listen. Don't follow." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin, every drip of the sink felt deliberate. I tried turning on the radio, but all I got was static. I turned it off again. That's when I heard it. Not from the window this time, but from beneath the floorboards. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. My flashlight beam caught movement under the floor. Small vibrations. Dust shifting in time with the sound. I pressed my ear to the wooden boards and my stomach turned. It wasn't tapping. It was breathing. I bolted out of bed, grabbed my gear, and drove. No destination, no plan, just away. The forest road twisted through fog and moonlight, the engine's hum the only steady sound. But even then, the tapping followed me, faint at first, then louder, echoing from somewhere deep inside the truck's frame. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. I slammed the brakes, the headlights cutting through mist and revealing something standing in the road. It was me. Same uniform, same build, only its face was slick with mud and its eyes glowed faintly in the beams. It lifted one hand and tapped the hood of my truck 3 times. Light, deliberate. Then again, my mind snapped. I hit the gas, tires screaming against gravel, the figure vanishing into mist. But the sound didn't stop. It came from everywhere. The dashboard, the roof, the back seat. I drove until the road turned into a dead end, a barrier of rock and pine where no road should have been. And there it was again, the smell of wet stone. I stepped out slowly, gun drawn. The air felt heavy, vibrating, and in that stillness I heard the cave again, whispering from the trees, "Stay." Something inside me broke then. All the logic, the training, the discipline that made me a ranger, it cracked. I ran. I don't even remember which direction. Just away from the sound, the reflection, the valley that shouldn't exist. When I finally stumbled into a clearing, dawn was breaking. I dropped to my knees, exhausted, mud streaking my arms, but when I looked up, the tree line was wrong, bent in that same inward curve. And far ahead, half shrouded by fog, I saw the cave mouth again, waiting. I was back in the valley. At first, I didn't believe what I was seeing. My brain refused to accept it, like a reflex against madness. The same crooked tree line, the same sloped walls pressing inward like a throat swallowing light. The valley had folded me back into itself. I turned in circles, scanning for the route I'd come from, but every path looked identical, every tree mirrored the next. The air was colder here, still thick, but charged now, like before a storm that never breaks. I wiped the mud from my face and told myself to breathe. Stay calm, assess, find orientation. That's what we're trained to do. But calm doesn't come easy when the land itself refuses to let you leave. I tried the GPS again, dead. The compass spun in lazy circles. My watch ticked once, then froze on 2:13 again. It was as if time itself bent to that moment. I could hear water dripping somewhere, steady and close. That same mineral smell burned the back of my throat. I followed the sound, hoping it would lead to higher ground or some landmark, but it only drew me deeper, through brambles, across slick stones, until I reached a narrow stream curling through the valley floor. That's when I saw it, the reflection in the water. At first, it looked like mine. Same posture, same tired eyes, but when I leaned closer, it didn't move the way it should have. My reflection blinked too slow, like it was a fraction of a second behind. Then its mouth began to move. I couldn't hear words, but the lips formed a single, deliberate shape. Stay. I stumbled back, nearly slipping into the stream. My pulse hammered against my ribs. The reflection didn't fade with the ripples. It stayed perfectly still, eyes locked on me even as the water shifted. That's when I heard it again, the tapping. 3 slow knocks, like someone striking hollow wood, but this time it came from all around me, echoing off the valley walls. Each one reverberated through my chest. I turned in every direction, but there was no source, just the forest, silent and watching. I shouted then, anger, fear, exhaustion all boiling up at once. What do you want from me? The echo came back twisted, not matching my tone. The voice that answered wasn't mine. It was lower, drawn out, almost like the cave's voice itself had learned to speak through me. To stay. Something moved in the trees then, a ripple, a shift of shadow that wasn't tied to wind. My first instinct was to reach for my sidearm, but some deeper instinct, the animal kind, screamed that pointing a weapon at whatever this was would only make it real. I backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the tree line. Then it stepped out, or maybe unfolded out is a better word. It wasn't human, not in any complete sense. It stood upright, but its form bent in ways the body shouldn't. The texture of its skin looked like bark and wet stone fused together. Its face, or what I could see of it, was smooth, blank, like a rock worn down by centuries of rain. But I recognized something horrifying in its outline. The same proportions as mine, my own height, my own stance, my shadow made solid. The thing tilted its head slowly, like studying me, and then I heard it, 3 taps. It was hitting its own chest, rhythmically, matching the sound from the cave. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. Each hit made the valley pulse faintly, like the air itself shivered with the vibration. My breath fogged the air between us, and then it mimicked me, perfectly. When I stepped left, it stepped right, raised my arm, it raised its own, delayed by half a heartbeat, but exact. And then it smiled. The skin around its mouth cracked open like old bark splitting. Its teeth weren't teeth at all. They were small stones, smooth and glistening, packed tight in a line. I ran. Branches tore at my jacket, roots caught my boots, but I didn't stop. Every direction looked the same, walls of green and gray, the cliffs twisting higher the farther I went. The air got heavier, harder to breathe, until each inhale felt like dragging in damp sand. Somewhere behind me, I heard the sound of footsteps, not hurried, not chasing, just following, keeping pace. When I finally burst into a clearing, I saw something that made my stomach drop. My own footprints. Fresh. Clear. The same tread pattern as my boots, looping in a wide circle through mud and moss, leading right back to where I stood. I'd been running in circles. The valley wasn't geography anymore. It was something alive, intelligent, folding itself to keep me inside. I collapsed against a fallen log, trembling. You're losing it, I told myself. You've been out too long, dehydration, hallucination. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true, because I could still smell that wet stone, and beneath it, something else, something metallic like blood. The air shifted. The tapping started again, softer this time, like from inside my skull. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it didn't stop. The rhythm wasn't just sound, it was memory. Flashes of faces from the ranger station, of Hal's warning, of every silent acre I'd ever patrolled. It was like the valley was rifling through my mind, learning me, wearing me. Then a voice, faint but clear, spoke from behind me. Don't look. I froze. The voice was Hal's. I turned anyway, and there he was, or something shaped like him, half covered in mud, eyes sunken, face pale as stone. He was kneeling near the stream, his ranger badge rusted over, his hands trembling. When he looked at me, it wasn't recognition I saw. It was apology. You shouldn't have come, he said weakly. Once it finds your reflection, you can't leave. What is it? I demanded, stepping closer. What's in the valley? He shook his head slowly. Not what, where. It's beneath us. It wants to be seen. That's how it remembers. Every ranger who's ever walked these woods and looked too long into the dark, it keeps them in there. He pointed toward the cave. I followed his hand, and for the first time I noticed the ground was trembling, barely perceptible vibrations rippling through the soil. The cave mouth wasn't just black anymore. It was glowing faintly, like something was pulsing inside. Hal looked at me again, eyes watering. You can't kill it. You can only forget it. That's how I lasted this long, but it's remembering again. He placed his hand on my arm. It was cold as marble. If you see your reflection move first, it's already too late. Before I could speak, the ground split with a sound like stone cracking under ice. The cave exhaled, a deep, guttural sigh that rolled through the valley and rattled the trees. Hal's eyes went wide. He let go of me and staggered back, shaking his head. It's awake, he whispered. You brought it back. Then he fell to his knees and began tapping the ground in rhythm. 3 taps. Pause, 3 more. Over and over, faster, harder, until blood streaked his fingers. The air buzzed with it now, the rhythm vibrating through my bones, syncing with my heartbeat until I couldn't tell which was which. The cave was calling. And somewhere deep inside it, something answered. The sound rising from the cave was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Too low to be a growl, too deep to be wind. It was as though the entire valley had become a throat, and I was standing inside it while it took its first breath in centuries. The earth trembled under my boots, vibrating in rhythm with that same 3-beat pattern. I could feel it inside my ribs. Hal was still kneeling in the mud, his hands bloodied, still tapping that, still whispering something under his breath. I grabbed his shoulders and tried to shake him out of it, but his eyes were fixed on something past me. The cave mouth pulsing faintly in the distance, expanding and contracting like a lung. Hal, we need to move, I shouted. He didn't blink. It's not the cave, he murmured, voice cracking. The valley is the cave. I looked around then, really looked, and the world began to twist. The sloped ridges, the inward curving walls, the shadows clinging to the ground, it all formed the shape of something immense, something living. The ridges weren't cliffs at all, they were ribs. The forest floor trembled, and beneath it I swore I saw motion, slow, tidal movement, as though something vast was shifting in its sleep. Hal let out a ragged laugh. We built the ranger station right over its mouth, he said. Didn't even know. Every path, every trail, every route we mark, it's feeding it. Slay. We think we're protecting this land, but it's been keeping us. His words barely made sense, but instinct told me they were true. The valley wasn't geography, it was anatomy. And something buried beneath the soil was waking up. A deep, resonant sound rippled through the air, and Hal convulsed. His mouth opened and mud poured out, thick, black mud mixed with blood. His eyes rolled white, and he whispered one final thing before his body went still. It remembers your name now. I staggered back, trembling, my boots sinking in the trembling earth. The air had grown heavy with that same metallic scent, and for a split second, I thought I heard my own name, whispered in my own voice, echoing from the cave. I turned toward it, flashlight in one hand, pistol in the other. The beam flickered, dimmed, then went black entirely. The valley was lit only by that faint, throbbing glow deep inside the cave. The same color as a dying ember. My mind screamed at me to run, but I knew I wouldn't make it out. Every instinct told me the same thing. The valley wouldn't let me leave again. So I did the only thing that made sense anymore. I walked back toward the cave. The air grew colder with each step, the smell stronger, a mixture of wet stone, iron, and something sickly sweet. The closer I got, the more I felt it inside my skull, that rhythmic pulse syncing with my heartbeat. 3 beats. Pause. 3 more. By the time I reached the entrance, the light inside the cave was alive. It wasn't fire, not reflection, not mineral glow. It moved, like veins of light crawling through the rock, pulsing in time with that rhythm. I realized, with a sick twist in my stomach, that I was standing inside something's bloodstream. I knelt at the threshold, gripping the stone for balance. The walls were slick and warm. The glow brightened with each breath I took, as if responding to me. And then, faintly, I saw shapes moving within the light. Faces, dozens of them. Each one distorted, stretched, mouths open as if gasping for air. I recognized one. A man whose photo had hung in the ranger office for decades. Lost during patrol in '84. His name was carved on a memorial plaque just above the radio desk. And now he was here. His reflection staring out from the walls, tapping weakly against the stone. I stumbled backward, hitting my shoulder against the rock. The sound that followed was deafening, a massive, low exhale that felt like it was inside my bones. The walls pulsed outward, slick with movement, and the ground began to rise under me, pushing me toward the mouth of the cave. Something beneath the soil was lifting me. I fell to my knees, my flashlight skittering into the darkness. The glow intensified, and for the first time, I saw it, the shape beneath the earth. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to know it was beyond comprehension. It wasn't a creature. It was the valley itself, a vast, hollow form with veins of light stretching through rock and root. The cliffs formed a ribcage, the stream its vein, the cave its open mouth. Every ranger, every hiker, every lost soul who ever entered had been absorbed, made part of its memory. And now it wanted me too. I tried to move, but the ground beneath me was liquefying, turning to slick mud that grabbed at my boots. The air was filled with whispers, my own voice repeating words I didn't remember saying. Stay, stay, stay. I fired my pistol into the cave, each shot echoing like thunder, but the sound didn't fade. The echoes multiplied, layers of my own gunfire overlapping until it sounded like dozens of people were shooting alongside me. And then silence. All but one echo remained. 3 shots. Pause. 3 more. Perfect rhythm. I turned to run, but the forest folded on itself. The trees leaned inward, their trunks bending as if bowing. The sky dimmed. For a moment I thought I saw stars, but no, they were reflections. Countless reflections of myself standing in the distance, each one turning its head toward me in unison. The valley had me surrounded by my own shadows. Give it back, they said in perfect chorus. Voices layered and flat. Give it back. My throat went dry. What? They raised their hands, all of them, and pointed toward the badge on my chest. It took me a second to understand. My ranger's badge, the symbol of authority, of protection, of stewardship over these lands. That was what the valley wanted. Not metal, meaning. It wanted the memory tied to it, the duty, the history, the belief that we were the guardians of the forest. The truth was worse than losing your life. It wanted to be remembered through us. My knees gave out. My heartbeat matched the valley's pulse, my breathing shallow, eyes locked on the cave as it opened wider, wider, like a pupil dilating to take me in. And then somewhere above me, lightning cracked. Sudden, violent, divine. It hit a pine tree near the rim, splitting it clean in 2. The valley trembled, the rhythm faltered, the pulse missed a beat. That was my only chance. I ran. I didn't think, didn't breathe, didn't look back. The valley's shape rippled behind me like something writhing underwater. The ground shifted, trying to swallow my feet, but I clawed forward, grasping at roots, at anything solid. I heard the tapping again, faster now, desperate, angry. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. I don't know how long I ran. When I finally stumbled out into daylight, I was no longer in the valley. I collapsed at the edge of a ridge, lungs burning, mud caked to my face. The forest stretched out below, calm, silent, innocent. Behind me, the valley was gone, just pine and rock and morning light, as if nothing had ever been there. But when I looked down at my hands, the mud on my skin was glowing faintly, 3 tiny pulses of light beneath the surface. And I understood what Hal had meant. The valley never lets you leave. It just moves inside you. When I came to, I was lying beside my truck on the ridge road. The sun was higher now, though I couldn't tell how much time had passed. My limbs ached, my throat burned, and the mud on my skin had dried into a strange gray film that cracked when I moved. The air smelled different here, cleaner, sharper, but I could still taste that metallic tang of the valley, like blood that refused to fade. The first thing I did was check my radio. It was dead, of course. Then I turned the ignition. Nothing. The battery was gone, like it had been drained from the inside out. I tried the backup hand crank beacon. It gave a brief flicker of light, then died too. Everything electronic was lifeless. That's when I caught my reflection in the side mirror. I almost didn't recognize it. My face was there, but the eyes, they weren't my color anymore. The green had dimmed, washed out into something grayish, like fog. My skin looked wrong too, slightly luminescent under the sun, as if light didn't reflect off me but seeped through me. I leaned closer, and the reflection leaned a fraction too late. I froze. For a long moment, neither of us breathed. Then my reflection smiled, slow, wrong, deliberate, and lifted a finger to its lips. I spun around, scanning the trees. Nothing moved, but the forest felt alive again. Too alive. The air hummed faintly, a low-frequency vibration that traveled through the ground more than the air. Somewhere, distantly, I heard the faint rhythm of tapping again. 3. Pause. 3. I climbed into the truck, slammed the door, and just sat there. My breath fogged the glass, but even that fog didn't behave right. It stayed longer than it should have, like the air itself was thicker. I told myself I'd hit my head, that I was hallucinating, still oxygen deprived, still dreaming. But then I heard the radio crackle. I hadn't touched it. The thing was dead, but a faint, wet static hissed from the speaker. I leaned closer. Beneath the static, I heard something else. Stay, stay, stay. The voice was mine. I ripped the mic cord out and threw it on the passenger seat, heart hammering. For a moment, the sound stopped. Then, softly, the tapping began again, but not from outside, from inside the radio itself, as if the static had a heartbeat. 3. Pause. 3. I grabbed my gear and stumbled out, leaving the truck door open. I needed to get back to the ranger station, back to people, to walls, to sanity. The trail that should have taken 2 hours back took nearly 6. Every time I checked my compass, it spun. Every shadow felt a half-second delayed, like the forest itself was waiting for me to notice something. By the time I reached the station clearing, dusk was falling. The air was still and golden, and the kind of quiet that used to comfort me, but now it only made me nauseous. The door was open. Inside, the lights were on. "Hal?" I called. Silence. I stepped in cautiously, boots echoing on the floor. The smell hit first, wet earth and stone, faint but distinct. The walls of the station dripped with condensation like a cave after a rain. My boots left dark prints on the wooden floor, and for a sickening second, I realized I wasn't alone in leaving them. A second set of prints, bare, human, smaller, led from the far corner toward the desk where the old radio sat. It was turned on. The speaker crackled faintly, spitting static that rose and fell in perfect rhythm. I approached, hand trembling, and the static stopped. Then a voice came through, broken and soft, like it was underwater. "You found it." I swallowed. "Who is this?" A pause. "Then you brought it back." The voice wasn't quite Hal's. It wasn't quite mine either. It was something between the two, familiar enough to trust, wrong enough to dread. "What do you want?" I whispered. "To remember." The light above me flickered once, twice, then went out. In the dark, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps moving across the floor behind me, slow, deliberate. The floorboards creaked, the rhythm precise. 3. Pause. 3. I turned with my flashlight, but the beam was weak, sputtering. The office was empty. The footsteps stopped just outside the light's edge. Then a hand touched my shoulder. Cold. Wet. The weight of it real and solid. I spun, but there was nothing there, just droplets of water sliding down my jacket where the hand had been. The flashlight flickered out. In that second of total darkness, I felt again, the breath of the cave. Not wind, not air. Breath. When the light came back, the reflection in the window stared at me. My reflection. But this time, there was more than one. Dozens of me stared from the glass panes of the station, from the metal surfaces of the coffee pot, the picture frames, even the sheen on the floor. Each wore a different expression: anger, grief, confusion, but all of them looked alive. Then they spoke, not in unison, but in cascading whispers that built into a single phrase. "Do you hear it now?" I stumbled backward, knocking the radio off the desk. It shattered on the floor, wires spilling out like veins. The static cut off instantly, replaced by silence so complete it felt wrong. I waited for something, movement, noise, anything. Nothing. Then, slowly, I realized what was wrong with the silence. It wasn't silent. It was breathing. The entire building was breathing. The walls flexed inward almost imperceptibly, as if the wood itself were inhaling and exhaling. I ran to the door, but it stuck halfway open. The frame warped like it was being swallowed. Through the narrow gap, I could see the forest. Only it wasn't the forest I knew. The trees had bent inward, trunks twisted into that same ribcage shape I'd seen in the valley. And down below the hill, faint through the dusk, I saw it again, the black shape of the cave, glowing softly. It had followed me here. I don't know how I made it through that door, only that I did. I ran into the woods, branches slapping my face, lungs burning. Behind me, I heard the ranger station groan, timbers snapping one by one. The earth under my feet trembled, sinking again to that endless pattern. 3. Pause. 3. The path ahead split and twisted. My flashlight beam caught glimpses of something moving through the trees, dozens of silhouettes, each shaped like me, walking in perfect rhythm. Their eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the dim light of the moon. They didn't chase me. They just followed, keeping the same distance, as if herding me somewhere. When I broke through the last line of pines, I found myself on a ridge overlooking the valley again. But this time it wasn't hidden. It stretched wide and open, lit from beneath by that same faint orange glow, like embers beneath a blanket of earth. And in the center, I saw every ranger uniform that had ever gone missing, lined up in neat rows, each one filled. They were all facing the cave. I stood frozen on the ridge, my lungs dragging in cold air that tasted like copper. Below me, the valley pulsed faintly, veins of orange light threading through the soil as if a giant heartbeat beneath the ground. Each throb sent a soft vibration up through my boots. I could feel it in my bones now, not just the sound, but the rhythm itself, syncing with my pulse. The rangers below stood perfectly still, lined in symmetrical rows. Their uniforms were faded but recognizable, the tan shirts, the dark green trousers, the badges gleaming faintly in that subterranean glow. From where I stood, I could see faces, pale, slack, expressionless. Each one was looking toward the cave mouth. I wanted to call out, to demand they move, speak, breathe. But my throat felt locked. The air here didn't want sound. Every instinct screamed that if I made noise, the valley would know exactly where I was. Then one of them moved. Just a small motion, a twitch of the head. Then another turned. Then another. One by one, dozens of them pivoted in unison until every single face was turned toward me. It was like watching mirrors turn to face their owner. Even from that distance, I could tell. They were me. Every one of them. My own face replicated in pale variations, younger, older, scarred, tired. I stumbled back a step, gripping the rough bark of a tree for balance. The glow intensified, as if my presence had triggered something ancient. Below, the line of figures began to move toward the cave, marching in rhythm. 3 steps. Pause. 3 more. That pattern again. The rhythm of the valley's pulse. The the same one that had followed me for weeks. I could have turned away right then. I could have run into the woods, vanished, forgotten it all. But some terrible human part of me, the part that had once sworn to protect this land, to understand it, needed to know, needed to see what they were walking towards. So I descended. The slope was slick and uneven, the mud sucking at my boots as if it wanted to pull me under. The glow brightened the closer I got, painting the trees in shades of molten amber. My breath came out in short bursts. Every few steps I thought I saw movement in the corners of my vision, the shifting of shadows that didn't belong to anything solid. When I reached the valley floor, the air felt thicker, almost liquid. Each inhalation burned, and the smell, that unbearable mixture of stone, earth, and old blood, was stronger than ever. I approached the first line of rangers cautiously, half expecting them to lunge, but they didn't. They just stood there, perfectly still, eyes glassy and skin slightly translucent, as though a thin layer of moisture coated them. Their lips were moving faintly, almost imperceptibly, like they were whispering to themselves. I leaned closer to one. His voice was barely audible, but I caught fragments. Remember. Stay, remember. I reached out, I don't even know why, and touched his shoulder. The flesh gave under my fingers like damp clay. My stomach lurched. I pulled my hand back, and a piece of his uniform came with it, sticking wetly to my glove. Then his head turned toward me. Slowly, mechanically, and his eyes weren't eyes anymore. They were two small stones, smooth and gray, embedded deep into the sockets. I stumbled backward, falling into the mud. All around me, the figures began to move. Not toward me, but toward the cave. Marching in rhythm, perfectly synchronized. Each step pressed deeper into the earth until the ground began to tremble. I scrambled to my feet and looked toward the cave. The opening was enormous now, twice the size I'd seen before, glowing from within like the heart of a dying fire. The figures were disappearing into it one by one, swallowed whole. And then I saw him, standing at the entrance waiting. It was the same reflection that had haunted me in the truck mirror, the window pane, the water. My double. Same face, same uniform, only it looked finished, like I was the draft and it was the final copy. Its badge gleamed in that infernal light, catching my eye with each pulse. It raised its hand and beckoned. Something in me cracked. My legs moved without permission, each step pulling me closer to the thing that looked like me. The ground vibrated with each footfall, the glow climbing up my legs like veins of light under the skin. When I reached the entrance, my reflection smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, but with a strange sense of inevitability. Like this was something that had always been coming. Behind him, or it, the cave wasn't dark anymore. It was a vast, hollow expanse filled with shifting figures and walls that pulsed like muscle. The ceiling dripped with veins of light, and the floor was liquid stone that rippled with each movement. The figures inside weren't people anymore. They were impressions of people. Faces stretched along the walls like wet paint, their mouths moving in silent unison. Every few seconds, one of them would open its mouth and release a single echoing word that rippled through the chamber. Stay. My reflection reached out its hand. Its palm was slick, its fingers trembling slightly. I should have run. I should have screamed. But there was something hypnotic about the rhythm, the breathing, the heartbeat, the tapping. It was in me now. I reached out too. Our hands met. The sensation was impossible, warm and cold at once, like plunging your hand into water that remembers being fire. My knees buckled, my vision blurred. For a moment, I wasn't standing in a cave anymore. I was standing in 1,000 places at once, ranger stations, trailheads, forest clearings, all of them filled with echoes of myself. And then I was inside the valley, not standing in it, part of it. I could feel its memory stretching through me, the way it recorded every step, every word, every man or woman who'd ever tried to chart its boundaries. I saw flashes of the old maps, hand-drawn lines that ended abruptly where the valley began. I saw the faces of every ranger who had vanished, each one whispering the same word over and over, remember. The valley wasn't trying to destroy us. It was trying to keep us, to preserve what wandered into it. the way the earth preserves fossils, the way the forest remembers fire scars. It wasn't killing, it was archiving. But in its preservation, there was no life, no escape, no end. I don't know how long I was there, seconds or centuries. The glow faded, the air thinned, and I found myself on the ground outside the cave again, the valley quiet once more. My reflection was gone. The cave mouth had sealed into solid rock, as if it had never been open. Only the mud beneath me still pulsed faintly, 3 slow beats before it went still. And when I looked down at my hands, my skin was smooth stone. For the first time, I didn't feel fear, only understanding. Because I realized then, the hidden valley wasn't hidden at all. It was waiting. Always waiting. And when rangers like me disappear, it isn't because we get lost. It's because the valley remembers who we were and keeps a piece of us, so the forest never forgets. They say the forest doesn't remember names, only the sound of how you said them. Maybe that's why, years later, when the new ranger arrived at the Bitterroot station, the radios still whispered a name that didn't belong to anyone living. My name. The logbook called it the Replacement Transfer of Personnel, Sector 9B. He was younger than I'd been, maybe 30 at most. Fresh uniform, shiny badge, still proud of what it meant. He didn't know about the valley. None of them did anymore. The official maps had changed. Knife Ridge wasn't listed on any of the newer survey sheets, and the stretch of wilderness south of it was marked as restricted, unstable terrain. But the forest remembers differently. He came in on a cloudy morning in late spring, hauling 2 duffels, a thermos, and a mind still full of optimism. The kind of optimism only rookies have before they learn that silence in the woods is never just silence. He signed in, checked the generator, and switched on the radio. It crackled to life, a ghost of static across the low-band frequencies. Station log check. This is Ranger Thomas arriving for duty at Bitterroot Outpost. He waited. The static whispered faintly, like breath against glass. Station! Station! He smiled, thinking it was feedback. Adjusted the gain knob, tried again. This is Ranger Thomas, copy. The static deepened, and this time the voice came clearer. Stay, he frowned. Say again? Stay. Then silence. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. Weird reception up here, he muttered and started unpacking. The station smelled like wet wood and metal. The walls sweated condensation even in the dry months, and the corners gathered dust no matter how often you cleaned them. On the shelf above the cot, a few items had been left behind, a cracked compass, a faded uniform patch, and a small field logbook wrapped in plastic. He didn't notice the initials etched on the cover at first. But when he did, he froze. Same initials as mine. He thumbed it open. The first entries were standard: fire watch notes, trail inspections, wildlife reports. Then halfway through, the handwriting changed, sharper, frantic. Sentences broken by long dashes. Open quote, the valley's breathing again. Hal's gone. Don't go past the draw. If you hear 3 knocks, leave your badge behind. Close quote. He frowned, flipping further. Open quote. It remembers names. The cave isn't a place. It's a mouth. If you see your reflection blink first, run. Close quote. He shut the log, shaking his head. Must have been the last guy. Lost it up here. He tossed it onto the desk and turned on the kettle. But even as he poured his coffee, the air felt heavier, like the building itself had drawn a slow breath. The radio clicked once. He turned, waiting. Nothing. He sat down and tried to shake the feeling, but something about the silence outside bothered him. No birds. No insects. Not even wind against the eaves. He rubbed his arms and glanced at the barometer on the wall. The needle trembled slightly, though the glass was sealed tight. Then came the tapping. Soft. Deliberate. 3 knocks on the window behind him. He froze mid-breath, coffee mug halfway to his lips. Slowly he turned. The window was fogged over from the inside, condensation forming thin streams that ran down the glass. Beyond it, the forest was dark, too dark for noon. He stepped closer, squinting, and that's when he saw the shape. A face. Not pressed against the glass, deeper, like a reflection hovering just behind it. The outline of a ranger's hat, the faint shimmer of a badge. The features were blurred, but the shape of the mouth was unmistakable. It was smiling. He stumbled back, heart pounding, the mug clattering to the floor. Coffee spread across the wooden boards like a spreading shadow. When he looked again, the face was gone. By dusk, the forest had gone still as stone. The radio hissed softly now, a steady heartbeat of static that matched the rhythm of his pulse. He tried to ignore it, tried to focus on writing his first nightly log entry. But when he touched pen to paper, the ink bled through in threes. 3 dots. Pause. 3 more. He dropped the pen. The power flickered. Once, twice. The overhead light dimmed, then died. The generator outside coughed, sputtered, and went silent. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out into the clearing. The air was thick, wet with the smell of rain that hadn't fallen. He flicked the beam across the tree line. Nothing, just mist, the kind that feels alive, like breath on your neck. He started toward the generator shed. The grass beneath his boots squelched with each step, like the soil itself was exhaling. And then he saw them. Footprints. Dozens of them, leading from the shed back toward the woods. Each print was deep, water-filled but fresh. The treads were identical. Ranger issue. But there hadn't been another ranger posted here in years. He crouched, tracing the edge of one print with his flashlight beam. It shimmered faintly, a pulse of orange light from deep beneath the water. He backed away slowly. The forest exhaled. Somewhere, faint and rhythmic, came the sound of tapping again. 3. Pause. 3. He turned the flashlight toward the trees. The mist shifted, curling inward. Shapes moved within it, too many to count. Silhouettes of rangers, shoulders squared, hats tilted down. Silent. Waiting. He whispered to himself, "What the hell?" The radio in his pocket crackled. He pulled it out, hand shaking. The voice that came through was soft, breathless, and painfully familiar. "Thomas," he froze. "Who is this? Don't let it remember you." The transmission cut. The tapping grew louder now, not from the forest, but from beneath his boots. He dropped the flashlight. The ground pulsed with faint orange veins, each beat shaking the soil loose. His breath came fast, shallow. He looked toward the station, but the lights inside were already flickering. Through the window, he could see movement, shadows pacing in rhythm, as if someone inside was circling the room over and over. He ran. Branches whipped his face as he bolted into the trees, his radio bouncing against his chest. He didn't know where he was going, just away from the valley's center. But the deeper he went, the louder the tapping became. It wasn't an echo anymore. It was everywhere. 3. Pause. 3. Each pulse made the forest lurch, trees bowing inward like drawn breath. The sky itself seemed to dim, clouds folding over the moon. His vision blurred, the world twisting at the edges. And then through the fog ahead he saw it, the mouth of the cave. It wasn't supposed to be there. The maps didn't show it. The terrain shouldn't have allowed it. But there it was, gaping wide, light pulsing faintly from within. He slowed to a stop, chest heaving. The air was thick enough to choke on, smelling of whetstone and rust. He heard whispers rising from the ground now, 1,000 voices saying the same words, soft and endless. Stay. He should have run, but curiosity is a curse that comes with the badge. So he stepped closer. The light grew stronger, painting his face in shades of amber and red. Inside, the walls pulsed with that same strange rhythm. He could see shapes moving just beyond the glow, dozens of them, all wearing his face. And then he heard the first voice clearly. It was mine. "Welcome back, Ranger." He stood there for a long time, frozen at the edge of the cave, the beam of his flashlight trembling across the threshold. The voice that had called to him still echoed faintly through the stone, familiar enough to raise the hairs on his neck. I remember the look on his face, the disbelief, the fear. He didn't know it yet, but the valley was already inside him. "Who's there?" he called into the dark. The echo came back fractured, as though the walls were breathing between syllables. "Who's there? Who's there? Stay." He tightened his grip on the flashlight and stepped in. The ground beneath his boots was slick, the air thick and humming. Every sound carried too far, his breath, the creak of leather, the wet drip of unseen water. And somewhere deeper in the cave, that steady pulse, 3, Pause 3 kept rhythm like a heartbeat. The walls gleamed faintly. Not rock, not mud, something else. The surface shimmered with a translucent sheen, and when his light passed over it, he saw movement within. Faint outlines, faces pressed into the stone, eyes closed, lips moving soundlessly. He reached out a gloved hand and touched one. The surface was warm, pliant, like living flesh. He jerked back. The radio on his shoulder crackled, the speaker hissing with faint static. Then, in a low, distorted voice, "Don't touch them." He froze. "Who is this?" The answer came slow, drawn out like a breath. "The one before you." My voice. He swallowed hard. You're dead. You disappeared." They said, "No." The voice interrupted, soft, almost sorrowful. "I stayed." He turned in a circle, flashlight sweeping across the chamber. The glow deepened ahead, drawing him further. "Where are you?" A pause. Then, "Everywhere it remembers." He followed the tunnel deeper until the floor leveled into a wide chamber. His light found objects half buried in the stone. An old ranger hat, a sidearm rusted through, a broken compass, and a field notebook identical to the one on his desk. He picked it up carefully. The cover was cracked, the pages fused with moisture, but one entry was still legible, written in my handwriting. Open quote, "If you find this, it means you've heard it too. Don't stay. The valley isn't a place. It's a memory, and it wants to make you part of it." Close quote. Thomas's breath quickened. "What are you?" he whispered. The voice came from everywhere now, from the walls, the floor, his own throat. The forest's reflection, the echo that never ends. His flashlight flickered, the beam bending as if light itself didn't work properly here, and in that half-glow he saw movement. Dozens of figures stood in the chamber now, emerging from the walls like the stone was giving birth to them. Each wore a ranger's uniform. Each had his face, their eyes opened in unison, blank and luminous. Thomas stumbled backward, hand finding the rock wall for balance. No, this isn't real." One of them stepped forward, its face twisting into something almost human. "It never is," it said, in my voice. He raised his flashlight like a weapon, shaking. "What do you want?" The nearest reflection tilted its head, smiling faintly. "To keep the story alive." And then, all at once, they moved. Not toward him, but past him, surrounding him in a slow, rhythmic circle. Each footfall struck the ground in perfect time. 3. Pause. 3. The walls pulsed with light, the chamber breathing. The air thickened until it vibrated in his chest. The figures began to dissolve into mist, their outlines bleeding into the walls, merging with the glow. Only one figure remained solid, standing directly before him. It reached out a hand. My hand. Thomas raised his own, trembling, and in that instant the two palms met. The entire chamber flashed white. For a few endless seconds, everything was gone. The valley, the walls, the light. There was only stillness and the sound of his own heartbeat. When the light faded, he was standing outside again. Morning sunlight burned through the mist. Birds were singing. The air was cool and clean, and the forest looked untouched. No cave, no valley. He looked down at his hands. Mud-streaked, shaking, but normal. His radio was silent. The only sound was the wind brushing through pine. He stumbled back to the station in a daze. The generator hummed like nothing had happened. The kettle still sat half full on the counter. The only thing out of place was the logbook on the desk. Its pages were open to a fresh entry, written in his handwriting. Open quote, "The valley is sealed. The forest is quiet again, but something watches from the glass." Close quote. He frowned. He didn't remember writing that. Outside, the world seemed normal enough. The air smelled clean, the sun glinted off the wet bark of trees, and a gentle breeze rolled across the clearing. He exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. He walked to the window and looked at his reflection. It smiled back. A knock sounded behind him. 3. Pause. 3. He turned slowly toward the door, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. "Hello?" No answer. The radio hissed to life. A single voice whispered through the static, soft as wind. "Ranger Thomas, do you copy?" He stepped closer, swallowing hard. "Copy. Who's this?" A pause. Then faintly, his own voice came through the speaker. "Station log check. This is Ranger Thomas arriving for duty at Bitterroot Outpost." The same words he'd spoken on his first day. The same tone. The same breath. He stared at the radio, frozen. Outside the window, the trees began to bend, swaying without wind. The air thickened with that familiar metallic tang, the smell of wet stone rising once more. The floor beneath him gave a slow, almost imperceptible shudder. 3 beats. Pause. 3 more. He stepped backward, eyes darting to the window. His reflection stood perfectly still, no longer mimicking him. Its mouth moved once, forming a single word he couldn't hear. Then the power went out. Darkness swallowed the station. The radio hissed one last time, whispering my voice. Calm, patient, inevitable. Welcome to the valley, Ranger. Silence. Only the faint echo of breath remained, pulsing gently beneath the floorboards. And somewhere deep below the forest, maybe a mile, maybe a memory, the valley exhaled once more. 3. Pause. 3. And the forest remembered another name.